Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I know sometimes we might give the impression that everything here at Longmeadow is without any problems. We don't have weeds, we don't have pests, everything just works smoothly. Well, I'm afraid that's not true. We have our fair share of weeds and pests and disease like anybody else. And there's a patch here in the Jewel Garden that is infested with couch grass that I've been trying to dig out for the last 25 years, and I've never quite got rid of it. And you can see they've entwined themselves in a line of Ophiopogon. And the couch grass, whose roots look actually quite similar to the Ophiopogon, have got inside the plant. And the only answer in that case with couch or with bindweed, where the roots will regrow new plants from just the scrap, is to wash the parent plant. Take it out, wash it down so there's no soil left on it, and you can see, you can disentangle the roots that you don't want, which is quite a job. But we shouldn't be fussing about the weeds at this time of year. A few weeds don't matter. What matters is that the garden is really at its moment of glory. And here in the Jewel Garden, it's ablaze. You've got the Crocosmia lucifer and the clematis in all its colours of purple and burgundy, the sunflowers, the buddleia that's coming through. And that's what I'm celebrating rather than worrying about weeds. Now, coming up on today's programme, we join Sue as she reassesses her summer borders.
I'm not sure how the anthuriums will mix, but, you know, it's trial and error gardening, and you could get a joyous union or you could get a horrendous clash. But, you know, that's how you learn.
We meet a gardener whose love of aloes and pitcher plants has resulted in a colossal collection.
Even I have a couple of polytunnels already in my disposal. Some of my carnivorous plants has already spilled out in the garden. Basically, there is always a space.
Advolly visits the romantic garden of Plas Brondanw with its spectacular backdrop of the Eryri National Park.
This is an architect's garden based around the views and vistas of the surrounding mountains. And when you're surrounded by such an incredible landscape, the results are breathtaking.
And I'll be planting amarine bulbs for autumn colour and checking up on my strawberries. This way, come on. At this time of year, it's the perfect time to prune back those shrubs that flower in spring and early summer. I'm thinking of lilac and mock orange. And I've got here a philadelphus, a mock orange, which has finished flowering a couple of weeks ago. And it's got lovely white flowers with perhaps some of the best fragrance you can get in the garden. It's called mock orange because it's got that citrusy orange smell to it. And it flowers quite a long time, but it produces those flowers on the growth that it made the previous summer. So, for example, you can see that this, which has got brown shoots, this is old wood. This is not fresh this year. And it's covered in flowers. These side shoots all had flowers on them. And it means that this particular stem will not carry any flowers next summer. Whereas this, which is much more pliable, pale green, new growth, this didn't have any flowers this year, but it will carry flowers next year. So if I want to prune it, if I prune that off, I'm not going to have any flowers. But I can prune this back if I want to, and that won't harm or hinder next year's flowers. So once one's got that idea in your head, then you can work out your pruning. But before I get to work pruning, now is the time to take cuttings. And when you're taking cuttings, what you're looking for is new growth, that is really good and healthy and doesn't have any kind of flower bud on it. And actually, this is a good example. And there's another good example. And you start to see that actually there's plenty of growth that I could take. So, we can get going. I will just take this here, pop that in the bag. Don't worry too much about where you cut them because you're going to cut them down and clean them up later. Right. Those will be okay for a few minutes while I do the pruning. So I'm going to take that off there, like that, and that can go. And then the ones below it can also come off, like that and like that, so they can go. And do you see, I'm cutting to something. It's an absolute rule of all pruning, is always cut to something. Whether it's the base, whether it's a leaf or a bud or anything, never cut in the middle of a stem. Because all that's going to happen is that exposed piece will die back, and the dying back will increase the risk of disease getting in, and it'll look ugly too. So we cut there. Let's take that back to there. That off. A bit of a cross there. Take that off. And I think that too, actually. And that's it. That's all I need to do. Just leave that. The new growth will ripen, and that will be ready to form flower buds, which will be at their best next June. Now, a few weeks ago, we went down to Swansea to visit Sue in her garden, where she's busy reassessing her summer borders.
I've been in this garden for almost 35 years, and as my knowledge has increased, so the garden has evolved. I made a beautiful daffodil border here, which I was really, really pleased with, but they don't provide colour all through the year. So I chose a perennial wallflower, Bose Mauve, to put some colour in, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm deadheading to keep them flowering all summer long and well into the autumn. Perennial wallflowers don't last forever, and so if you want to increase your stock, it's important that you take cuttings, and the sort of cuttings I'm going to take are heel cuttings. You take a branch that hasn't got a flower showing, and you gently pull it down away from the angle of the plant, and then it exposes this green which has a lot of cambium in, and that's the stuff that helps to root the plant. Now, you need to get it into a plastic bag as soon as you've cut it to help keep the moisture in. I'm taking quite a few cuttings because there's a change I want to make in this border's sister border. This is the sister border, and I planted agapanthus because I had them and it was a cheaper option. But unfortunately, they're not in flower yet, whereas the other border started flowering in March and will go through to November. So it's a no-brainer for me. I'm going to take out the agapanthus in the autumn and put in some wallflowers. I've got a lot of plants on the go at the moment, and I've also taken some perennial wallflower cuttings already, but I need loads more, as you saw. So take them out of the plastic bag and remove the bottom few leaves, so you get a nice long stem. You don't want the leaves to take the energy out of the plant, and also you've got to get right into the centre here and pinch out the top bit. There we go. Pop it in as far as it'll go, and then firm it in. And now I've got to water them in. I'm going to put the pot in a plastic bag to create humidity and help it to get rooting quickly. And I'm going to keep that pot out of direct sunlight. And in a few weeks, I should start seeing new growth appear from their top. That's when it gets exciting. And hopefully I'll have lots of plants to plant in the border for the autumn. And now I want to show you my hot borders, which haven't all been plain sailing. I've grown a lot of things from seed, including cosmos. And a top tip here, I've got white cosmos somewhere else in the garden, and I've got red cosmos. And to stop me getting confused, I put the white cosmos in a round pot, and I put the red cosmos in a square pot. And I'm going to get them in the ground now because they really are desperate to get out. These 4 hot borders are proving a bit of a learning curve. I'm really pleased with my dahlia and with my potentilla, but this bed has proved a little bit difficult. I planted a lot of cornflowers. They're a beautiful colour, but the wrong colour. And they grew 40 centimetres more than it said in the packet, and they fell over. And I've cleared the area, and I've chosen plants that I'm fairly confident the colour will be correct. I've got some anthuriums, which I've never grown before, called Potomac Red. And I've got this lovely Japanese bloodgrass called Red Baron. I'm really excited about that. I've got Cosmos Rebrenza that I've grown from seed. And then I've got a Rebeckia called Cherry Brandy, which is really red and has a tint to its leaves. This border's a bit wider than I normally like because I'm standing on one leg to do a lot of gardening and I can only reach about 45 centimetres. I'm going to have to plan so the plants that don't need much attention will go at the back, and therefore I won't have to get in and fiddle with them too much and walk on the soil. And I think the best thing for that will be the bloodgrass because it sort of does its own thing and it doesn't need deadheading. And I love the way I think it really complements the cosmos. I'm not sure how the anthuriums will mix, but, you know, it's trial and error gardening, and you could get a joyous union or you could get a horrendous clash. But, you know, that's how you learn to get better. I'm going to leave them in their pots for a couple of days to make sure I've got the right plant in the right place. I will water them to keep them happy, and there's one more job now I've got to get on with. I've got 2 white borders. One's formal and one's wild. Not everything is going right in my formal border, so I need to slightly change my thought process a little bit. I put some new plants in my formal white border and they're not doing very well. And I think that may be because the hydrangeas are shading them. One in particular that I really want to do well is Veronicastrum virginicum album, which is a lovely white flowering plant and it makes its presence felt in a border. So I'm going to put the spare ones I've got in the wild border because I think it gets a bit more sun and they might develop a bit better. I'm going to put a little bit of compost in the bottom of the hole just to give it a little bit of a head start in life. And then I'm going to put the plant in. Now, it's got a bit kinky in its growth habit. And I don't know why that is, and I don't think that's going to be very helpful as it grows up. So I did put a stick in it, but I think I'm actually going to cut it back. I may not have flowers this year, but by cutting the stems, it will send all its energy into getting a really good root system developed. And I should have a nice lush plant. So it's all about patience gardening. I love the business of designing my garden. It's a constant process of updating and adding and changing. And then it takes patience to wait, and sometimes that can be years until the border fully develops. And you may get it wrong, but never mind. And when you get it right, it's absolutely joyous.
Well, Sue's hit the nail on the head, because the greatest liberation in gardening and the most sure road to happiness and enjoyment is to allow yourself to fail. And that certainly applies to cuttings, because with cuttings, some are not going to take, some are going to fail. But it's surprising how many don't. I do need to make sure that I have a pretty free-draining compost. Perlite is great for cuttings, and you can just use pure perlite. Because It's open and light and lets air in, but also improves drainage and gets a really nice texture. So I'm just going to mix that in like that, and that's ready. Right, let's prepare the cuttings. The first thing I'm going to do is take off these leaves. We don't need them, and they are losing moisture and therefore hastening the demise of the cutting. Now that's too long as a cutting. We don't need all that. So I'm going to take it down to below a node. All it means is the point from which the leaves emerge. Get my perlite mixture. And so I'm going to pop that in down there like that. Let's prepare the others. Take that down there and pop that in. Take that off there. Leaves, leaves. I do know that when you start out in gardening, cuttings can seem a little intimidating. Somehow it's a sort of higher level of horticulture. But that just is not the case. So don't be intimidated by it. Give it a go. Some will work, some won't. But you'll be amazed at how many do. And it's one of those things that is really satisfying to raise a plant. You know, it could be a shrub or a tree even, from a cutting. It feels like magic. And it is a kind of magic. Now, at this stage, you water it. If you've got a polythene bag, you can put it over the top, and these ones with the zip tie are very good because they tie round, and that keeps the moisture in. They should be creating roots in about, well, somewhere between 10 days and 3 weeks, and we'll start to see new growth. And then either they can be potted on in late summer or early autumn, or left in the pot with their roots and potted on next spring, and in a couple of years' time, you'll have a whole new philadelphus to plant out. Now, I love plants, and I do see that there are a lot of gardeners that are very excited and interested by collecting as many of a particular type of plant as possible. And back in May, we went to visit one such gardener whose love of collecting, at times, I think I'd be the first to admit, can become all-consuming.
My collecting habit is a little bit more like an obsession. I've always been fascinated about what plant can I have in my garden. So basically, there is always a space. My name is OG Placido. I grew up in the Philippines. We are surrounded by trees. Basically, we have a rainforest at the back of our house. The need to be surrounded by greenery and living things, it comes up naturally for me. So carnivorous plants, I actually came across them by accident. I have a garden, and every year I have been stung by horseflies. It's burning sensation and usually lasted for 2 weeks. And I said, "Ooh, this is nasty. I need something to control it." So I said, why not pitcher plants? I tried it, and in the last 5 years, I never had a bite. So I said, oh, that works. I stumbled upon a collection that they want to let go because I think the owner can't take good care of it anymore. And I said to myself, oh, I got space. I said, why not? So I bought actually a third of the collection, which is around 4,000 plants. And from there, this is now the result of it. So Sarracenia comes in different size, shape, color, and the brighter the sun, the brighter the color it gets. So this one is called Max Rollings, and the moment you see it, you can't unsee it. I just love them so much. Some of them I let them flower and some of them I just cut off the flowers. For the main reason is when they flower, usually in early spring, the flowers comes out first before the picture. So what I found that if you let the flowers bloom like what is, as you can see in here, the pictures is usually a month delayed later. So like this one, for example, this guy's own flower, but as you can see, the pictures are just starting to come out. Some of my plants get knocked off like this, the 4 plants that I have. So what I have, this very, very simple trick and solution. I have this stick, which is just a regular barbecue stick. And then pipe cleaners. What I love about pipe cleaners is malleable enough and sturdy, and also they're quite soft to the plants. That won't damage it. So there you go. So you have now your standing plant again. Even I have a couple of polytunnels already in my disposal. Some of my carnivorous plants has already spilled out in the garden. They can grow outside in this condition. So here, they're being rain-fed and exposed to the elements, but they still survive. They need to be fed with rainwater only. One of my favorite among the Sarracenias, this is a species called Sarracenia rubricorpora. This is a native of Florida. What I love about this one is the lip is vividly yellow, and then the whole picture itself is got this vividly green color in contrast with the veining on the top. Beautiful plant. As well as pitcher plants, I also collect aloes, and this has started in 2019. And as you can see now, I actually need another polytunnel. They are so-called low-maintenance plants. This is not just plants that I collect, but I'm also doing the breeding as well. I wanted to create aloe hybrids that are actually small and that are perfect for windowsill spaces. When I do my breeding program, I basically have the mother aloe who will produce the seed, and I also got the father, which is the pollen donor. The mother usually carries the size, the shape, and the color of the offspring, and the father or the pollen donor will be carrying the texture. So what I do, I use a tweezer, which I have in here, and I will take pollen from the father, and then all I do is just touch it into the stigma. And after I've done that, I usually use this jewelry pouch to make sure that there will be no cross-contamination. So no insects can come in and cross-pollinate it, because I really wanted to make sure that what I really want will come out into the offspring. However, it's still not guaranteed. But this is the beauty about breeding. Anything can come out randomly. Aloes has got a very, very long root system, and also they love having the cooler roots to grow them in these Japanese bell pots. It ticks all the boxes because it's white. It actually promotes a cooler environment for them, and at the same time, because they're a little bit tall, the long root system also tick all the boxes. With regards to medium, my requirement is always 30-70 ratio. 30% organic. You can use an ordinary soil on it, and you mixed it with 70% mineral. I discovered that clay grit, which is the one that they use for oil spillage, is value for money, and it's available everywhere. Or the other one is, it's sometimes referred to as a cut litter. So there are cut litters that are actually the same ingredients that they use. Having the two are a little bit extremes. So I have aloes which are colorful, the texture. What I love about the pitcher plants are its function. It's a natural fly catcher, but also you get the size, the color, and the flowers of my pitcher plants are just magnificent as well. There's no competition. It just like so happened that I want the best of both worlds, basically.
I love the fact that OG, having been bitten by a horsefly, went and bought 4,000 sarracenias to defend himself. Well, I just have 1 or 2 sarracenias, and what I didn't know was that letting the flowers develop would delay the pitchers by a month. But I love the flowers. I'm very happy for them to grow, and the pitchers do come. What I've learnt over the years is once they start to brown, don't hang on to it. Cut the pitcher right back, because that will encourage new growth. If I open one of these out, you can see the residue, the rather disgusting residue of digested insects. But there have been some years when they've been full to the brim. This year, hardly any, and that is all part of the fact there is a desperate shortfall of insects this year. It's really noticeable. Insects and butterflies are very thin on the ground indeed. Now, still to come on today's programme. Advolly visits the historic garden of Plas Brondanw, set within the beautiful landscape of the Eryri National Park.
Through the gate, you can sometimes see the peak of Eryri or Snowdon, because Williams Ellis designed the garden around focal points like these, ensuring that each view acted like a picture frame.
And we visit a modern garden near Stratford-upon-Avon that is full of wildlife-friendly plants.
I love this garden because it is full of life. As soon as you open the door and step out, there's going to be something moving or flying, or there'll be little plops as frogs jump in the pond. It's absolutely teeming with life.
But first, we visit the garden of a mother and her son in Reading.
Hello, Gardener's World. I'm Pepper.
I'm Linus.
Welcome to our untidy garden. As you can see, we are not very tidy gardeners. We have a really simple planting strategy. Put it in and see if it grows.
Our garden is for playing, learning, and growing.
But we also wanted to create a home for nature, which includes trying to embrace living with a family of moles. We don't have much room inside our house, so this year we tried growing seeds in milk jugs. With our southwest-facing garden, it means that this time of year, most of the garden gets a good amount of sun each day. So we have several plant nurseries at different places in the garden to nurture our little seedlings. This year, Linus's mud kitchen has been converted to house all of his seedlings. Some seeds are ones we've bought, but the majority are ones we found around the garden or on our woodland walks. Every morning before school, he has a look to see what has grown and what has been chomped by the slugs. Those in need of TLC have a stay in our plant hospital. This is our second year of growing hops, and after a slow start, it has really taken off. My husband is hoping for beer, but Linus and I have other plans for a hops garland to go inside the house. Our garden isn't perfect, and there are probably a lot of things we could do better. But we love it, and we wouldn't change a thing.
Thank you for visiting our wild garden.
I love Linus and Pepper's delight in their garden. And if your garden's making you happy, if you love it, then it's a good garden. Now, not everything here in the greenhouse is good by conventional horticultural standards, because the tomatoes have suffered quite badly from whitefly. In fact, if I jiggle the leaves here, we might see someone come up. Look at them. The whitefly's been worse than I've ever known it. Now, that has two effects. On the one hand, it makes the foliage go yellow and almost die back. So I've taken most of the leaves off. The other effect of whitefly is that their honeydew attracts a black mold. And that's not just on the leaves, you get it on the fruit as well. This is a good example. You can see on there, this black sort of staining is the mold on the surface of the tomato. Now, that looks disgusting. In fact, it washes off and the fruit is absolutely fine. It's the plant that suffers. By and large, by this stage, not a lot you can do. It's a bit late in the season. Prevention is better than cure. And good ventilation and also keeping the humidity quite high. If it's very dry, just water the floor. Elsewhere, things are fine. Good peppers, we've had great basil, it's now flowering. We've had a lot of pesto, we've got another batch ready to come through. We've got cucumbers just spilling out of the plants. And I think the thing about cucumbers now is, it's partly through the breeding and partly because they're relatively easy to grow, is if they work at all, they give you a glut, rather in the same way that courgettes can do. They also have got whitefly in quite a big way. You can see them here. They don't seem to be affected, not in the same way as tomatoes were. And now, today, I want to plant our aubergines. Now, it is late to put them in, but there is a reason for this. I sowed a batch of aubergines back in April, and they germinated really badly. So I abandoned them and sowed another batch at the beginning of June. So this is very late, but they come through, and you can see now that they are starting to flower, and that means that they may well produce fruit. It's much too late to plant these outside, and if they do fruit, it's going to be September, October, but there's no reason why that may not happen. So we've had parsley in here, cleared the base, and I'm going to plant these out. Aubergines grow fairly large, so they need to be spaced reasonably far apart, sort of something like that will do, I would guess. And then across here that way, and like that. That and that will go there, and this one we can pop at the back here. Now, aubergines are related to tomatoes and chilies. So if you can grow tomatoes or peppers, then they should grow fine. They need plenty of water, so keep them well watered. And the only years that I've had really good aubergines here at Longmeadow have been those summers when it's been blisteringly hot. So if I get any, I'll be very happy. These will need probably a bit of support too. Just a short cane is enough. Once they reach about 2-3 foot tall, pinch out the tops. That will encourage side shoots. And if we have a lovely September, October, there's no reason why we couldn't be harvesting them then. Now, earlier this summer, Advolly went to visit another of our great historic gardens. And this one is Plas Brondanw in Gwynedd.
Every garden benefits from making the most of the surrounding landscape, borrowing views to provide a backdrop for its design, making the garden feel part of the scenery, as if it belongs there. And when you're surrounded by such an incredible landscape, the results are breathtaking. The garden at Plas Brondanw is surrounded by the spectacular Eryri National Park, and was the creation of a single unique designer, Clough Williams Ellis. This is an architect's garden. It's structural, based around the views and vistas of the surrounding mountains, and it reflects Williams Ellis's personal taste in every step, stone and statue. Born in 1883, Bertram Williams Ellis, known to all by his middle name Clough, was a Welsh architect and environmentalist. He fought all his life to preserve the unique character of the gardens and buildings around rural Britain, particularly North Wales, where he grew up. Clough Williams Ellis is best known for Portmeirion, the Italianate town that he created about 5 miles from here on the Welsh coast. But it was this garden at his ancestral home that he loved the most. He said, "It was for Brondannw's sake that I worked and stinted. For its sake, I chiefly hoped to prosper." He inherited the property in 1908 from his father. The house was crumbling and the garden had been turned into allotments. He spent the next 70 years lovingly rebuilding, still adding to the garden in his 90s when his budget would allow. Williams Ellis said, "A cheque of £10 would come in and I would buy hedging to that extent. A cheque of 20 and I would pave a further bit of terrace." And in this manner, his garden came together piece by piece. The garden is divided into several small rooms, filled with the eccentric objects that Williams Ellis collected over a lifetime. The use of tall yew hedging and narrow passages leads you through gaps, finding surprises around every corner. It could feel confused, but all these spaces are linked through his love of local materials, which can be seen throughout the whole garden. Looking around, you immediately get a sense of place. The slates in the walls are from quarries in this valley. And some have been recycled. Look at this one. It has a hole in it where it was once used as a roof tile. He loved a bit of make, do and mend. And offset against the greens and grey, he added splashes of colour that shine out all year round. This turquoise and gold detailing can be seen all over Plas Brondanw, and it was inspired by the garden's history. The turquoise represents the sea and the gold, the sand. Believe it or not, until 1811, the sea stretched up much further into the estuary below the garden, until a sea wall called the Cobb was built in the coastal town of Porthmadog. In the space of a few years, 2,000 acres of farmland were reclaimed from the sea. Plas Brondanw was no longer a seaside garden, but these colours are a reminder of its maritime history. And through the gate, you can sometimes see the peak of Eryri or Snowdon, because Williams Ellis designed the garden around focal points like these, ensuring that each view acted like a picture frame. This framing technique was inspired by Williams Ellis's love of Italian Renaissance gardens, which are full of avenues and vistas. Looking east to west, this long line of yews, gates and stone walls helps to frame the Moyle Hairbog mountain. This one here, an effect only slightly marred by the new trees growing outside the garden, which now block the view. But inside the garden, the views can be controlled. And at the end of every vista is an eye-catcher. No matter which way you look, you're always pulled forward to explore further. William Ellis was a magpie when it came to statues, and he frequently visited reclamation sales from country houses, mixing and matching whatever he could find. On one wall sits a classical trio of busts and statues. But turn a corner and you'll find a much more modern, baby-faced fireman with working hose. And some statues are complete fabrications. This bust of Caesar, for example, has a classical pillar, a plaque saying it came from Napoleon's estate. But actually, all three pieces were bought separately, glued together to create this marvellous piece of historical fiction. The garden continues outside the walls into a woodland with the greatest surprise yet. During World War I, William Ellis served as an officer in the Welsh Guards. He married in 1915 and at the end of the war was offered a traditional silver serving plate as a wedding present from his fellow officers. But instead, he asked them to help him build a ruined castle on a nearby hillside, the final piece he needed for his garden. This is so typical of Clough Williams Ellis's philosophy. The folly is made from local stone. What could be more romantic and personal than a collapsing castle? Also, it fits with the countryside, nestling into these mountains with a perfect view of the landscape he loved. Apparently, when William Ellis asked for this folly instead of a silver platter, his commanding officer said, "It's an odd sort of present, I must say. But standing here with Wales at my feet, I know which one I would choose."
Despite that being an extraordinary, grand and beautiful garden set in that magnificent scenery, there was one little touch that struck me as something that we could all relate to, which was this idea of getting £10 and, yeah, I can go and buy some hedging plants. Or if you get £20, you buy some stone. Of course, you can multiply that up, and over the years, it accumulates. Right, I've got here my normal compost, which I'm going to mix with some grit to make even lighter. And when I say normal compost, this is a mixture of a coir-based bort compost, garden compost at sieves, some grit, a little bit of perlite. But I want this to be really free draining, so I'm going to add extra grit. Right, let's put that down and give it a good mix. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm planting some bulbs, but these are not bulbs for next spring. These are autumn flowering bulbs, like either nerines here, which you can still buy, and you can see that these are sprouting. Normally, if you read the textbooks, they will tell you to plant autumn flowering bulbs in April or May. Here we are now in August, and it is still possible to do it if you really get on with it and do it this weekend. You can buy nerines and plant those, but amarines, which are a cross between amaryllis and nerine, with some of the vigour of amaryllis, but the delicacy of flowering of nerines, certainly you can get and certainly you can plant. But both of them have two very specific demands in which they need to thrive. The first is as much sunshine as you can give them. Wherever is the hottest, driest place in your garden that bakes, that's where they want to go. And the second thing is drainage, which is why I've added the extra grit. And unlike most bulbs, which you bury, amarines and nerines you plant with the snout, the pointy bit, sticking out of the ground. So if we're going to put these like this, and this is a variety called Aphrodite, which is a lovely pale pink, and I'm going to mix them up with one called Anastasia, which is a slightly more magenta-y pink. So we have a double pink, which I think will look good. And then filling around them but not burying them. So if we just go like that, that's all we need to do. We'll just label that. I will water these and keep them watered. Just because they like lots of heat and sunshine doesn't mean to say you should let them dry out completely. And they should flower in about 6 to 8 weeks' time. Now, we're going to visit the garden of Dion Sambrook near Stratford-upon-Avon, who, when she isn't playing saxophone in a band, is creating a haven for wildlife.
I love this garden because it is full of life. As soon as you open the door and step out, there's going to be something moving or flying, or there'll be little plops as frogs jump in the pond. It's absolutely teeming with life. And there's usually something new that I haven't seen before. Even if it's a slugworm that's chewing my birch tree, I've seen that today for the first time. There's always something new, so I love it all. Even the hedgehog poo. I'm Dion. This is my garden, which is a fairly new garden. It's 6 years old in a brand new village that's built on a brownfield site. I've always had an interest in the environment, so I did actually study environmental science, and I ended up actually working as a soil scientist principally, so I like getting my hands dirty. The more you put into the garden, the more you get, and so it's endlessly fascinating. It's really important to me that I'm doing lots of little things that I've put in all through the garden to support nature and encourage nature and wildlife as much as I can. So I've planted quite a few different native plants because I think they're beautiful in their own right, but also because the native plants support a wide range of different insects or birds or mammals. So I've planted quite a variety that come up all through different seasons. I've also built into the garden a pond and a lawn. Now the lawn is ever shrinking, and my husband has mentioned repeatedly that there's hardly room for the dog. There's a lot going on in a really small space. So this area of the garden is the most shady patch. It gets the least amount of sun and no sun at all for half the year. So I planted this just thinking very carefully about what plants will do well in shade. And I also wanted to make sure it was really green and lush and provides lots of cover for wildlife, but also to include some native plants as well. I've got some native ferns, the male fern in there. This beside me is a teasel, which I think is a fabulous, statuesque, architectural plant. And actually I sowed this from some seed from a Christmas decoration I'd made, because the teasel heads, the flower heads, are beautiful. They're also great for pollinators when they come into flower. And then the seed heads are also popular with small birds, such as goldfinches. I've got some lovely white bladder campion, which is a native flower. It's a really interesting shape and quite unusual because it has this fat little bladder behind the petals. I've got a little pile of 7 frogs that are all sunbathing. Oh, another one's just popped up actually. I could lose hours just looking in that water, watching all the little creatures whizzing around, and the pond snails and the dragonfly nymphs. Creatures of the deep that suddenly appear up. The first time I saw one of those, I thought, good grief, what on earth is it? Every time there's something to look at, look up and learn about. So there's a nice mix here. There's different types of plants, so there's some lovely uprights. There's several different mare's tails, and also one of those oxygenates the water to make sure the water keeps healthy and clear. Natural ponds are still water, so having fountains or filters or pumps aren't ideal for wildlife. So you have to make sure that the planting provides all the nutrients and oxygen in the water to support the wildlife. There's flowering plants in the pond, And on that side, there's a lovely water forget-me-not. So the flowers look just like a normal common forget-me-not, but it actually lives in water. And then on this side of the pond, there's a lovely plant called a bog bean, which again is a British native, and it has the most spectacular flowers for something that has such a dreary sounding name. It's absolutely lovely. One of my favourite flowers is ragged robin, and I fell in love with ragged robin just walking on the hill over the way, because there was a huge bank of it growing, and I'd never seen anything like it before, because it's a beautiful pink and really pretty, delicate, raggedy flowers. So I then got myself a packet of seed and have that all around the back of the pond. So I'm a gigging musician. I play saxophone in a couple of bands, getting home 1, 2 in the morning. So it means that the next day, being in the garden is just a lovely way to sort of relax, pop some headphones on, listen to some music, maybe have a little sing, just enjoy the space. A nice, gentle, relaxed pace. Wait till you hear me singing, you'll regret that. So I'm going to plant this. It's called a Deptford pink, and it's a type of dianthus, but it's a native and it's actually endangered. So it's only found in a couple of dozen locations in England now. So I thought it would be a lovely wild flower to have in this new border. This border is all for pollinators, so it's a real mix of natives and non-native flowers. They look beautiful, but also attract pollinating insects. I'm also going to plant a wild carrot. So the wild carrot has a lovely big flat white flower. It's an umbellifera, which will look beautiful next to the white toad flax, as well as attracting beneficial insects. I see this space as a little green oasis. For me, as well as for nature, I'm very excited, having made a little hole under my fence, to now have hedgehogs coming in, because they're becoming increasingly rare. So that's really exciting that I'm enticing slowly bits of nature to come into my garden.
Very impressive the way that Dion's garden has already, despite being in a new build, got so much for wildlife in it. A plant that's certainly not native, but is looking wonderful at the moment, are my tree ferns. And although this summer has been pretty miserable for us gardeners, it's been grey and it's been damp and it's been a bit chilly, for tree ferns, it's been heaven. Now, my strawberries this year have been a profound disappointment. Not because they haven't grown, but because they've grown too well. The weather has been very conducive to growth, but not to the ripening of the fruit. So what we've got here is a mass of foliage, plenty of fruits underneath, and there still are plenty of fruits, but they haven't been ripening. Underneath the foliage, it's been very damp, it's been dark, and they've been rotting before ripening. And the thing to do now is cut your losses, cut back all the foliage that you can see, and move on and prepare for next year. So be bold, get in there, and just cut like that. Now the reason for doing this is to let light and air in and allow the new growth to come through. And you can actually see already, and you see in there, these new leaves just beginning to appear. Otherwise, if you leave them, they get suppressed and the old leaves die back on top of them and the whole thing becomes a bit of a claggy mess. Now, this might look a little bit brutal, but I promise you the plant will be fine. When I've finished cutting back, I will water them thoroughly, I'll mulch them, making sure there are no weeds, and that will set them up. So the plants will grow back, and then they're in a situation either to be left, ready for next year, or if I want to move some, or even add some in, September is the time to do that. Well, I've got a lot more to do, but here are your jobs for the weekend. August is a good month to cut long grass that's had bulbs and wildflowers growing in it. Cut it as short as you possibly can. It may take several passes of the machine to do this. And then gather up every last scrap of the cut grass, which can then go to the compost heap. And don't worry if the result looks rather sculpted and bare, because bare soil is an opportunity for the wildflower seeds to germinate. The grass will quickly recover, can either be kept short by mowing it weekly or allow it to grow long again. If you sow hardy annuals, like these cornflowers or nigella or monticella now, they will flower earlier than normal and give you a range of display spreading across a number of months. You can sow them where they are to flower, but I find it easier to sprinkle the seed onto a seed tray, let them germinate, prick them out, and then either plant out the seedlings in autumn or keep them over winter and plant them out in early spring. This year, strawberries haven't just grown vigorous foliage, but they're also sending out long runners. And it's these runners that produce the plantlets, which are ideal for making new plants. Choose the healthiest plantlet closest to the parent, cut off the others, but leave a little bit so that you can pin that onto the surface of compost. And you can either use staples or fashion your own from a length of wire. Leave it for about 2 or 3 weeks, by which time it will have set roots down into the compost. You can then cut it clear from the parent, and it's ready to replant wherever you want it to grow. At this time of year, the light changes, and towards the end of the day, you get this slightly lower light where it really glows here on the mound as it cuts through, just through a certain group of trees and picks up the colours, and they look at their very best. But that's it for today. And next week, we're with Adam in his garden. And so you can join him at 8 o'clock next Friday and rejoin myself, Ned and Patty back here at Longmeadow in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, bye-bye.